You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 55. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. If you've thought that you don't have what it takes to be an entrepreneur, today's episode is going to make you rethink that. I have joining me today the CEO and founder of Hint Water, Kara Goldin. Now, Hint has branched out since first launching water over 15 years ago to also sunscreen and deodorant. And the reason behind those products is because Kara found a passion and a purpose of creating something that wasn't already available for others. You're going to hear her journey, not just from leaving her town in Arizona to going to work for Time and CNN, but to becoming a mom and finding that she was struggling to lose the weight. She had acne and she wanted something healthier for herself. That's when she discovered she needed to drink water. But then she got bored. So what was she going to do with plain water? Well, add fruit, of course. Now she discovered that not only was adding fruit to her water making it something enjoyable, but as she shared it with friends and family, they were enjoying it and wanting to know where she was buying it. She wasn't buying it, friends. She was making it in her kitchen. That put her on her journey to launching Hint Water. I love hearing all about how she got to where she is and how her and her husband, Theo, started out by delivering the water in the back of their Jeep. She's so relatable and just honest, and it's a fabulous story. Her book, Undaunted, as I mentioned, launches today, and it is such a great read. I got to read it before our interview, so I am telling you this from experience. She's not just relatable, but she's just pure fun and sweetness, and she's honest. So sit back and listen to the amazing and incredible journey of Kara Goldin. Hi, Kara.
Hi.
I am so excited to have you on the show today. Can you please introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah. So my name is Kara Goldin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Hint Water. And I have a bottle here, as a matter of fact, and that I'm going to have a sip of. And I'm also the author of a new book called Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters.
Which is launching today.
Yes, very awesome.
So exciting. It is such a good read. I got to read it cover to cover, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm not just saying it because you're on the show. I actually did like it. And I loved to hear about your true pivot, because everybody who's been on the show, including myself, we all have some sort of a career pivot change. And you basically, I'm going to coin this phrase, you're the queen of online shopping. You created it. We would not be having, Amazon Prime days and enjoying shopping from our home without you, really, because you pioneered this movement. So can you tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you went from this tech world to water and other things, deodorant and sunscreen too?
Yeah. Well, there were a few other people besides me doing shopping way back when, but I was like there in the early days for sure. And definitely played a part of that. But yeah, I mean, I didn't, I sort of call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I never kind of dreamed of actually launching my own company. It was, clearly I look back in the rear view mirror and sort of think, there were definitely signs that I would eventually go do it, but it was not what I thought I was going to do. And I never worked in the beverage industry or the food industry. And I had my job before launching Hint was at a company called AOL, and I was running their e-commerce and shopping partnerships, and really kind of came to that role on kind of by accident too. I was really kind of following this guy named Steve Jobs, who was in the early 90s was doing his thing at Apple and Next and some other companies, along the way, and really had developed this idea inside of Apple that was doing CD-ROM shopping. And so his idea was to make shopping easier for people. He really felt like he needed, and also more graphically interesting, he really needed like a disc that you could have all the graphics on there. And then once they were on there, then the consumer just needed to know that you just shove it into the computer or into the drive, and then you would be able to see it, and it wouldn't matter about, baud modem speeds. I mean, all this language that the youngsters listening to this probably don't even know what that means. But really, I was inspired when I moved to San Francisco after reading an article about, this idea. And I just literally picked up the phone, having no experience in tech, and said, gosh, I'd just love to come and work for you. And I think they were desperate just to have warm bodies in the room or something. I don't know why they hired me. And I was, at the time, the only girl, in the company too. And I mean, for so many reasons, I shouldn't have even gotten the job. I think for me, it was I don't know. I was just really curious, and had also had moved from New York, had worked in media at CNN, and prior to that time. And, I had sort of some ideas about things like, how do you make money, and things that were really foreign to, Silicon Valley back then. It was let's just go create these things and see what happens. And I was always okay, but how do you make the money? And so for me, I bundle all those things up into really kind of the company that I've created, and kind of why I wanted to go and do what I did, but also added a lot of personal components to that too, in terms of things that I really cared about, like my own health. And I couldn't figure out why I'd gained a bunch of weight over the years, and developed terrible adult acne, and wasn't sure exactly why that was going on. And I was also really focused. I had 3 young kids at the time when I left AOL, and was focused on making sure that they were as healthy as possible. And that's when I kind of figured out, and part of what I talk about in this book is really the building of Hint, and kind of the reason why I decided to do it.
Well, I love you also talk about how once you launched Hint, you discovered this was your passion and your purpose to change the lives of people. And for me, after being 18 years in corporate aviation, it wasn't that I was passionate about it. They're jets, they're sexy, that's it. But I sold jet fuel. So I'm not really passionate about that at all.
Yeah.
But I am passionate about wanting to figure out why I'm here. What kind of a difference can I make while I'm living on this planet? How can I, make sure that my children are feeling that they found something, that they have purpose in life? And you've done this with water. And I love it because not just has it helped you health-wise and helped so many others. You talk about cancer patients and people with diabetes, but you also talk about now you're going into schools and you want to, work with legislation, because I didn't even know that our states don't regulate the water that's in the water fountain for the kids. So it blew my mind. I read that and I was hitting my husband are you kidding me? Do we know what our son's drinking?
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, they do have some regulations, and, it's not totally like a free for all, but I think that the sad thing is that there's holes that are in there, as an example, one thing that is required, but I think it's interesting how they word it. It's not more than 5 spigots within a school. And so it doesn't matter the size of the school. It actually matters they don't care if you have 300 water fountains with, spigots, 300 spigots or whatever, or 10. Like they want to see 5 examples of what comes out of the water in these schools. And, in a city where, like, I don't know, there's a lot of regulations around, basic, what you can, what with the planning department, like what your zoning and all kinds of other things. Like it's somewhat shocking that when you sit there and talk about health and like measurement. P.S. We're in Silicon Valley where there is, lots of measurement, right? We are not actually measuring something that I think is as important as, 2 things, health and our children, which I think is absolutely scary. So it's something that I've, it's like a passion project for me. I've learned a ton about water just in running this company, and, sort of PS, and kind of another thing that I, talk about in the book too, is how you can actually run a for-profit company and make a difference. And actually, I feel like I've been gifted all this knowledge primarily because I'm supposed to do something with it, right? And so, when I showed up in Washington a year ago and ended up meeting Congresswoman Jackie Speer from California, I started sharing some of the stuff that I knew and, was educating her on lots of issues like around water, not just in California, but just in general. And so we're actually working on a bill that would go before Congress, hopefully soon, that would hopefully clean up our water supply and really put pressure on every state to, and potentially the EPA, to look at certain substances that are in our water, including something that is not actually measured in most of our water supplies called PFAS, which is a known carcinogen that, according to the NIH and the Center for Disease Control. And, it's something that only recently actually came up with some tests around COVID, where people under autopsy or, survivors of COVID are actually, they're finding that people who do not develop antibodies often have PFAS in their blood. And PFAS is like there was a movie out last December called Dark Waters that talked about exactly what this chemical is. Aaron Brockovich has done a lot of work on it as well. But it's essentially Teflon, and DuPont has a ton of lawsuits against it. And, when we decided that it wasn't great in the cookware, we decided to dump it into the water, or some company decided to dump it into the water. And unfortunately, all of our waters actually connect. And so some areas, that actually don't do much with their water, that are just running through their towns, are actually seeing the effects. And these people are not able to fight off or create antibodies around COVID, which is, crazy. So we're actually trying to get the EPA to consider PFAS a dangerous substance, because if it's considered a dangerous substance, then it actually forces the states to measure it. Mm-hmm. And so, I've learned so much about water. It's like, it's somewhat crazy. And, the other thing I've learned is that things just take way longer than,
nothing happens overnight.
No. And so I can't even imagine, like, people are like, well, don't you need somebody to like do like this all the time? And I'm like, there's nothing to do. I mean, I'm sure there's something to do, right? Like, I'm not, I don't know. I can't, it's just, things just move so slowly. And I think it just gets, it's something I can't imagine doing that role every single day, like pushing forward with it. Cause it just, we're really reliant on Congress to actually look at it. And obviously there's a few other things going on right now.
A few other things that have gotten pushed forward.
Yeah. And so, it just keeps getting backburnered, which is, sad, but fine. I understand that there's other things that we need to look at, but still it's something that I really feel like sort of the other learning, and, for anyone listening, is that I used to think that you can only go and work on initiatives like, stuff in Washington when you're a nonprofit, right? And what I've learned is you actually might have a louder voice when you're actually running a for-profit company, and you can take a lot of your learnings. If you're a scrappy entrepreneur like me, who's like learned a lot about business, and again, I've learned so much about how this stuff runs and what gets done. So it's fascinating to me.
So let's talk about how things don't happen overnight, and how you launched Hint because you wanted something healthy. You were addicted to Diet Coke. And what I love about your book the most is how relatable it is, because I can see you very pregnant walking into Whole Foods and just chatting it up with the guy who's stocking the shelves. Because that would be me. I'd be like, yeah, let's chat. How do I get my water in here?
Yeah.
So how did you, it amazes me, your story of how you and Theo create these flavors, and you still do in your kitchen. And I wouldn't even know where to begin, but obviously you've done your research, and this has taken years to come to fruition, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But to be where it is today. So can you dive a bit into that part of your story for those who don't know the background of Hint, or who are just learning about Hint as you become bigger?
Yeah. So, it kind of got incubated when I had left AOL, and I was off for a couple of years, and I was, being an at-home mom. I wanted to spend more time with my young kids. And then I really decided I wanted to get healthy and, get rid of my skin issues and weight and improve my energy levels. And that's when I realized that everything that I thought I should do, including shop at Whole Foods and work out, and that basically wasn't working. I was actually gaining weight by, you can actually get really unhealthy by shopping at Whole Foods. I found I was it's so much fun. Things taste really great. Right. But there's things with lots of salt and sugar and so you just have to read the labels. And so once I sort of got on that program where I was okay, just because they're fancier foods and things are more expensive, it's that doesn't necessarily equate to health. But I'd been reading labels, and for me, the kind of key epiphany came when I looked down at this can that I was drinking that was my diet soda, and it had. I had been reading ingredients on my food, but not on my drinks. No one told me to do that. So I turned my can around one day and saw how many ingredients were in this diet soda. And I thought, gosh, I should probably apply those same rules to, my food or to my drink as I am my food. And that's when, I really realized that I had never really thought that there was anything wrong with my diet soda because it was called diet. And so I almost had this fascination with how I had been tricked and how I had been marketed to for years, around this word diet. And that's when I kind of came to this decision that I'm going to put my diet soda to the side for a few weeks and really just start drinking water and see what will happen. And that's when I saw how crazy it was that, just by giving up my diet soda and drinking plain water, I lost over 24 pounds in 2.5 weeks. I mean, it was melting off. I just couldn't believe it. And then I started slicing up fruit and throwing it in the water to get me to actually enjoy the taste of it. And that's when I really started to think of it on sort of a bigger level, which was I knew so many people that were on diets that were, trying to change sort of health issues that they had, whether it was type 2 diabetes or cholesterol or whatever. And I kept thinking gosh, it's really hard. Like when you try and like change a health issue that you really want to change, it doesn't matter if you have, the income to go like shop at a place like Whole Foods, or like people just don't know how to do it. Right. Like, and so I thought it was at that moment when I was just really thinking, gosh, it like really wasn't that hard for me. I just like started drinking water, and that actually changed a lot of things. And of course I gave up the diet soda too. So I was kind of living with this for like a year. I lost, some more weight. And like I said, my skin got better and my energy levels got better. And then after about a year, I, was slicing up fruit still. People would comment, "Oh, like, how did you decide to have that kind of fruit in your water today?" Like they would see me like in my glass, I'd have half a pomegranate or whatever. And so then I was in stores just like looking for this product. And I really believed that it was like me, not them. Like I just wasn't finding it. And I kept thinking, where would I find a product like this? And again, going back to Whole Foods, I kept thinking, oh, it's probably like that. That's the most logical place where I would find something like this. And so I started talking to the guy that was stocking the shelves at Whole Foods and sharing with him that, I had been creating this water at home, and, I didn't know what I was talking about, like as it related to like having a product other than I was a consumer and I would totally buy it. And he agreed. And, we sort of looked at some of these other products on the shelf, including vitamin water. And I explained to him like vitamin water at that time had more sugar in it than a can of Coke. And like, I just thought like, wow, there's like, the decks are stacked so against consumers to actually figure this stuff out. And I should just go and create this product. And I don't think he really thought I was serious. Like he was just kind of like, oh yeah, right, lady, you should like go create this product. But I went home and I was just like, Googling and just really interested, right? Like I just thought, oh wow, it's like, it's so interesting, like to think about how these big industries become, so big, and they're doing, so much to actually like harm. Right. And I remember just thinking, wow, that's just, it's crazy that this world exists. And that's when I just thought, maybe I should just get the product on the shelf. I'm not working anyway. And so see what happens. And, little did I know that, well, a couple of weeks after making this decision, I found out I was pregnant. So that's when I decided to drop the bomb on my husband that I was not only starting a beverage company with some of the money I had made from AOL, but also that I was pregnant with our fourth child. So he like learned it all in one day and wasn't sure how he was taking it, but he seemed to do okay. And then I told him that I was going to Chicago and we were going to talk to a bottling plant out there. And I said, that's really great that you're coming with me because I might get morning sickness, and, just sort of shared with him like how hard this world was. And so that's when, he really realized how it was, my purpose, and how I always talk about Hint is, we're definitely a beverage company, but it's it was always the vehicle around health that really drove me to start this company. That I had been thinking about it. I was frustrated. I was kind of angry, like all of those things, because I felt like I'd been fooled. And so that's when I just thought, if I can just kind of, change the direction a little bit and change the industry, that would be super awesome. So that is really, when like the next 6 months while I was pregnant, I was developing, the initial learning, and I thought it'd be a perfect time to go and start this company because, I can just go find a real job like later on after I have the baby. And so that was always the thinking. And then we were supposed to get actual product delivered to our garage like 2 weeks before I was having a planned C-section. And that didn't happen. And then the day before I was having my planned C-section, the pallet showed up, and I woke up that morning. I was having a planned C-section on May 27th, 2005 at 2:00. And I said to my husband when I woke up that morning, or he said, well, what do you want to do today? Do you want to go on a hike? Do you want to go to brunch? And I'm like, I'm like, oh, can we go to Whole Foods and see if we can get it on the shelf? Because I think it'd be really great if I like got the product on the shelf before we like delivered the baby. And he's like, not what I thought you were going to say, but fine. And then when we got there, that's when I see my friend, the guy who's stocking the shelves, and he said, "Wow, you're really pregnant." And I was like, "I know, right?" Like, and he was like, "Are you going to have your baby now?" And I said, "No, I at 2:00 this afternoon, though, I am going to have a baby." And he said, "How do you know you're going to have a baby at 2?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm having a planned C-section." He was like, "What's a planned C-section?" So the next 15 minutes, my husband, horrified, backing into like the fruit and vegetable aisle to like run away from me. He was like, "Oh my God, she's really going there. She's going to tell this poor guy about a planned C-section and vaginal delivery and everything." And he's like shaking his head. I mean, he's heard me have these kind of stories, like dialogues with my girlfriends, right? And so he wasn't totally surprised, or he didn't think I was, incapable of, having these conversations, but he was just like, "Oh my gosh, it's crazy." And then at the end of the conversation of me educating him on, different types of C-sections, I then shared with him that it'd be really great if you actually put it on the shelf and put it in the cold case. And that's in, he didn't confirm it, actually. He left it. He said, "I'll try." And, "Thanks so much." I mean, he was very nice about it. But I went and delivered my son, Justin, not really knowing whether or not it got on the shelf. And then I got a phone call the next day from the guy at Whole Foods, and he shared with me that the product was gone. And I was like, "Who took it?" Like, I still didn't believe, like, we had dropped 10 cases, and I'm like, where'd it go? And he said, "No, it's sold." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's really interesting." And he said, "I need more product because I'm going to get in a lot of trouble with my managers if I don't have more product to replace it." And I was like, "Okay, well, we're going to check out of the hospital right now, and we'll bring some more product over." My husband actually went and delivered the product, and that's when he kind of like, people always ask, like, when he joined. I mean, like, he kind of was doing stuff with me early on at the plant and making sure that the product was getting made, primarily because I was writing $50,000 checks off for a personal bank account, and he kind of wanted to know where it was going because he knew that I could spend money really fast. But he was like, "This is like a weird, thing. She's like buying bottles and caps and labels, and it's just bizarre." And so he joined like kind of unofficially before the launch, and then at the launch, he was clearly like, he got a business card that day, the next day that we got out of the hospital, he got a business card that said Chief Operating Officer. And he's a Silicon Valley lawyer, recovering lawyer, as he talks about. But he was like, "Chief Operating Officer, that's what I'll be for Hint." And it was kind of like, "All right, fine. Well, be whatever you want. I have 4 children under the age of 6, and I need all the help that I can get." And then when he realized, I think, kind of the bigger mission around actually helping people. And from day one, we were getting emails from customers who, we had an email on our label, and customers would write into us and say, "Oh my gosh, I discovered your product. Like, you're helping me, like, drink water, or, mask the metallic taste that I get through chemo," or like all these, amazing, things that I always share with people. Like, I never used to get at like these tech companies. Like, they wouldn't write saying, "Oh my gosh, you've helped me shop." Like, maybe they would say,
my
like,
life.
"Yeah, you've got the easiest way to actually shop, and we love your brands," and all that kind of stuff. But they wouldn't actually, like, it wouldn't be so personal, right? Versus
powerful
and impactful and motivating. And, and that is like something that still holds true today, 15 years later, that I share with people, like, what, drives me and what motivates me. It's the exact same thing that did from, day one. It's really the customer feedback and how they feel about it and how surprised they are and excited. And I think like oftentimes we're the first step in actually helping people know that they can do it. and get healthy. And I think like to be a brand like that is just incredibly powerful.
I feel like you're fearless to a certain extent. I know that you have some self-doubts that you share in the book, but overall you have this, well, just invent that. Like you've gone from the water, now you've got sunscreen, you've got deodorant, and you're like, oh, this product doesn't exist, so I'll just dabble in it and, figure it out. Oh, here's a new product. And I think that's just so amazing that you have that capability, because so many wouldn't. It would be an idea that doesn't come to fruition. Where does that, I want to talk about your dad too, if we have some time.
Yeah.
Because I think some of that might obviously has stemmed from your dad. Your dad was, I told my husband who he was, and he's like, what, really? He invented the healthy choice meals, which is totally crazy. And it was that, he concocted this, and with Julia Child, who I got to meet one time because I went to UC Santa Barbara and she lived there, and I ran into her. So I think it was so cool to have that story of how he created this. You're a creator. Ultimately, that's what you are. You're an entrepreneur, but you're such a creator who's fearless of, well, I can figure this out. And I think that's just so incredible that you go and you do it, even though you're fighting some of the self-doubt that I think a lot of us have just in general, but somehow you overcome that and you pass that.
Yeah. I mean, look, we never really know kind of how we got the way we got. Although I always tell people that, no matter what your journey is, it always had impact, right, on sort of who you ultimately become. And certainly my dad, was kind of, I call him like a frustrated entrepreneur, because he, never was a true entrepreneur in the true sense. He was always coming up with different ideas and sketching. He was constantly like thinking, things out. And, but I think for him, it's kind of a generational thing too, where people, used to go and get jobs and then they just wouldn't leave. Like maybe they would leave once, right? But otherwise you'd stay at companies forever. And I think, he was able to, he actually developed Healthy Choice. Originally it was called Dinner Classics, and it was at a company called Armour Food Company, and Armour Food Company got acquired then by ConAgra. But it was interesting because, I think it's still today the number one, product for ConAgra. It's crazy. And, I look at, how he sort of like thought of himself. And like for him, it was just like the same kind of thing. Like he wanted healthier and better for you meals. I don't know if you remember like Stouffer's TV dinners. I mean, like my dad just thought it was like mystery meat, and he used to talk about it as like awful. And the reason why, he wasn't having this option of like home cooked dinners is because my mom decided she wanted to go into retail, and she had been an art history major basically her whole, she graduated from college from University of Minnesota and was an art history major, and, was an art teacher and substitute. And then, we had 5 kids in our family, so she stayed home. And then when I went to kindergarten, she decided that she really wanted to be in fashion and be in retail. And so she went and sort of found her passion. And, it's like my dad, most people would actually learn to cook if their, spouse went back to work. My dad thought, I work at a food company, and so I'll just go create a product around it. And, but yeah. And so, he did that, and clearly it inspired me. He was alive actually when I developed Hint. And I think he was like super excited and proud and shocked, right? Like he was like, finally, I have like somebody that is developing, something that is kind of like me. But I think also, another thing that I always share with entrepreneurs when they ask me like, I have this idea, should I actually launch this company? I'm like, I haven't like lived your life. Like, I don't know what your situation is. I mean, and I often share the story of my dad that, for him, like he was nervous, right? About leaving like a secure job. And also he really, like the thing that he cared so much about and was so proud about all his kids about were that they were college graduates. Like it's like what people value and it was just, and for, when I think back on sort of like living with him, kind of being frustrated at different times and like, being angry about where he was or whatever, I think, like it's because he put his own responsibility, like for putting food on the table to like 5 kids, that basically led him, right? Not saying it was right or wrong. It was just like sort of a realization. And so I think, definitely gained stuff from him, gained stuff from my mom, sort of, in her mid 40s, going and doing something totally different, right? And that she wasn't like schooled in, she hadn't done retail. She was like fascinated by it. And then also, my siblings, I mean, various points I talk a little about in the book, and, how my brother, who's a lawyer today in Arizona, but how, he was constantly trying to figure out ways that he was in law school and he paid for law school and wanted to do like entrepreneurial things along the way that allowed him to not work while he was in law school. And so he would, buy old VWs and fix them up. And, I just liked that he had really cool music in the garage and was playing his 8-tracks, right? And so, and I'd like go sit in there at night and do my homework, and like he'd be frustrated because he'd break apart on the car, and he would share with me, don't ever buy this model or stuff. And I'd be like, how's that different? And, I was always curious and asking questions along the way, or, he would ask me to go ride my bike around the block and find the houses that were chipped up so that he could like go and ask them to go paint their house, so he'd make some money. And so I think I learned, just a ton, like I was a sponge, right? Like I was learning from all these different people along the way, which I think is, it's the story of being a child, right? And really like, don't rely on one person to sort of give you information. Like, I really think it's like okay to get it from a lot of different directions.
Well, and something else you mentioned in the book is that you've always asked questions, and it's obvious that you're a real people person, because as we go through your career at, time, and you didn't know really what you were doing per se, within the job, you would ask people and you made connections. And one of the things that I love that you said, because we don't do enough of it today, is that you'd pick up the phone. Mm-hmm. Nobody picks up the phone. Heck, I didn't even pick up the phone to talk to you. I sent you an email.
Yeah.
you know, and it's that connection and just not being afraid of what's going to be on the other end of the line. I think when you were afraid to move to New York and your dad goes, well, what's the worst that could happen? You move back. Okay.
Yeah.
If that's the worst, then just go for it. And I think that's perfectly how you've defined and led your life from what I've seen, in the book and following you.
Yeah. And I think it's an important, point to make too. It's not that I don't fear. It's that if it happens, like I'm okay with it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's I never allow it to be such a huge deal. And I think sometimes I've thought about this extensively, and, my husband being married to me for 25 years has also, said you're like the master of this stuff where, when you are really afraid of things, you actually are really good at breaking them into parts and just looking on those individual challenges. Like you don't actually add them all up. Right. And break them down. And I think that is something that I even learned like in, being an athlete, right? And like knowing that I may not actually, be a great all around gymnast, but I'm pretty damn good on, the vault, and I'm good on this, and also appreciate and watch the people that are better than me. And I don't sit there and not want them with me either. Like, I think that there's like a lot of, things that I've picked up along the way that are important, like life lessons. Right. And again, I didn't intentionally go and become a gymnast to go and learn those kind of things. But now when I, play out sort of how I tackle big, hard issues, I go back to, being a child athlete. And, and I think so many entrepreneurs today, particularly female entrepreneurs, had actually, been at least through high school athlete. And I think it's fascinating, and they kind of think about things the same way. They never allow these challenges to get so big. It's not that they didn't have failures along the way, but I think it's an important, kind of piece to highlight.
I love that. Yeah. Breaking it down so it's simpler parts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes everything, your outlook, easier if you don't have to do something so big and cumbersome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I love that. I have to say this, that you and your husband obviously are best friends, not just to be married for 25 years, but to be working together. My husband and I have been living together, not just 24/7 for COVID, but for, oh my gosh, since before we were pregnant. So like 6 or 7 years. We're under the same roof 24/7 together.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, we must really like each other. And that's obvious that you and Theo do too. And I love that you are together in all of this and that your children see that. I think it's so important that your partner is your best friend and, not simply your partner, your spouse, but so much more.
Yeah. And we're really different people too. I mean, it's funny when people who haven't known us and I mean, even the guy that kind of introduced us, I mean, it's funny. He was like one of my great high school friends and he was going to law school with Theo in New York. And he always reminds me that he would have never put the two of us together, like ever. And so I always share with people, like, you just never know, like, and that was it. Like, we had just sort of never met people like us. Like he had never met anyone from Arizona. He was like asking me if they ride horses in Arizona. I'm like, probably, I don't know. There's like a few people that have horses, he was like, but do they ride them like on the streets? He's in New York. I was like, oh my God, you're hopeless. Like, I was just, like stuff like that. Like, I'm like, where have you been?
Shouldn't you have a broader mind in New York?
Yeah. Like so much more sophisticated than me. And I was like, please, like I just from day one. And so again, like, I think, we are best friends, but, we also I think we appreciate each other and we call each other on stuff. And I think that's also, leading a company. I think that, we definitely have roles, but in the company's chief operating officer, I'm the CEO, but we also, I think what's great about it's not for everybody, but I think what's great about it is, we have kind of, instead of having, my family and my company, and then my co-founder has has their family and their company, we just have two things. It's actually simpler. Like, we can sit there, if one of our kids is, we had 4 kids under the age of 6 when we were starting this. So if one of the kids is sick or one needs us, to do something or whatever, it's just kind of like, hey, can you do this or whatever. And it's just a lot easier than actually thinking, oh, I'm doing so much more. Like, there's never that conversation between the two of us. Mm-hmm. I mean, because we both know that, we're just sitting there trying to figure it out. The only thing that we have a conversation about is who is making the decision around dinner. Like, that is like a key thing. I'm like, don't always look at me saying like, I have to make the decision. Like, I'm always like, and I've got 3 out of 4 kids home right now that are, older, high school and in college. I'm like, you're all really capable of doing this and you can make these decisions too. No, Mom, you have to do that. So
I get the same thing. Yeah, I get the same thing. And I always have. I've got 2 stepkids that are now 21 and 18. And so I used to sit them down once a week and I'm like, you have to pick a meal. You have to figure out what's for dinner one night a week. I'll cook it, but you have to figure it out because I'm done thinking for all 4 of us. Now there's 6 of us, 7 nights a week. I'm over it.
It is. It's the thinking. It's like, I don't even mind the shopping. It's like, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's all easy. It's just like the actual thinking and trying to figure out, what I want or whatever. But anyway, so that is life in the Goldin household. And
I love it.
Yeah. And, yeah, it's really great. But I also think, even in writing the book, I mean, it's, I made him like read the chapters and edit, and he'd be like, meh, like, yes, it happened like this, but it sort of was like this, and and I was like, okay, like, because he'll remember things along the way too, and also he'll remember things about how I was feeling along the way too, and I think like that kind of thing, to be able to have somebody that kind of answers for you. And even when I haven't been able to be around, I mean, right now, as I'm on my book tour, it's like, it's been crazy, like being the CEO and also doing the book tour. And, it's great. Like I've said to people, like, if you can't reach me and you really need something, just call Theo, and like, he'll figure it out. And I have so much trust that he would be able to answer for me on so much stuff, that it's like, yeah, it's fine. Like I mean, I can't even count on two fingers times when I've been like, I would have never done that. Like he really, he totally like, knows it and follows it. And so it's, so it's good.
I love it. You're a pleasure. Oh. I hope we get to meet, since we're basically in each other's backyards.
Yeah,
that would
for
be
sure.
Fun.
Hopefully
over
soon.
hint or a glass of wine.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Can you please share with everyone where they can find you, your podcast?
Yeah. So the podcast is actually, it's in the process of changing names, because it ends up, there are a lot of unstoppables. So we have unstoppable guests, which we will not stop having. But we're changing it to my name, the Kara Goldin Show, because we finally, I said, no one can take that away. Like, it's like, It's my name. And so definitely come see us. We've got a lot of amazing, great, mostly founders, but also just disruptors and, interesting people. I just had actually just last week, just launched the CEO and grandchild of Radio Flyer, the wagon company.
Yeah.
And and that was just, for me, like, I just said, like, what an iconic brand. Like, it's just like, who doesn't love a red wagon? I mean, it's like it's always my go-to when I can't figure out what to get a child.
Yeah.
Like,
and they're still around.
Like, a red wagon. You can never have too many wagons. And so anyway, just talking about not only founder stories, but for me, that's one where, like, he felt a responsibility. And I think especially during times like, a pandemic, where maybe you lose your job and maybe your parents had been, running a company. I've talked to a few people who are like, I've been thinking about going and helping my parents, and, I've seen things that maybe I'm able to like look at closer. So anyway, for me, it's also kind of like, it's just almost therapy again, to sort of get on the podcast, and it just helps me think about things. And I really don't generally do beverage companies, because I feel like, I don't know, I might give them bad advice, or I might not, I don't know what I would do, but I've just found, except if it's like wine or beer, I would like do that. But
I like those
non-alcoholic, right? Like I just, so that's that. And then my book, like I said, is called Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. And hopefully you'll all read it, and you can see more info at undauntedthebook.com and karagoldin.com. And also it's available at those sites to buy, but it's also available at Amazon too.
Perfect.
So,
and it's good. It's really good. I've read it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, really, really fun.
I hope you've already ordered your Undaunted book and you are sitting back and about to read it with your hint water, because they totally go hand in hand and are simply perfection. I really enjoyed chatting with Kara, and I hope that you understood that you can do whatever you put your mind to. Whatever you find that you're passionate about, what brings you purpose in your life, you have the power to do that. You can start from your kitchen. You can deliver products from the back of your car. You have the power to change the future. I love how Kara shared how her growing up in her parents' doing what they were passionate about and going for it played such an integral part in who she is today, and how her husband is right on board with her, and they're doing this together side by side. She's got an incredible story, and I really hope that you go grab your copy of Undaunted so you can read the rest of it, because it is such a good read, I promise you. As always, friends, remember that you're in charge of your future. So stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy.